Sad, sad, sad. Being wisely soft is an art form, a skill that is essential, absolutely necessary in this practice, in the study and practice of the Dhamma. Whether one has a teacher or not, not becoming or staying or remaining rigid is necessary. We need to become permeable so the Dhamma can seep through, not remain like a granite wall, thick. We need to become permeable and not rigid when studying the Dhamma, and especially when we practice. Always keeping an ear out, just to catch something, to be able to adapt. Because the Dhamma is always speaking to us. It's always trying to whisper. But not much is going to be learned unless we are permeable. We need to become more penetrable, if you will, and willing to be soft. In other words, it is a learning to trust. A learning to trust. But it is a skill that requires from us. Constant balancing. Being able to become cognizant of what is happening and not take sides, usually with our mind, with our tendencies, with questioning the world, with questioning the Dhamma. Because for eons, we've been placing so much credence, so much trust in how we interpret life, how we understand life, how things are supposed to be. But if we're going to experience what the Dhamma has to offer, we cannot keep holding on to those beliefs. Hence the Buddha's emphasis on the importance of first having right view. Because most of us are deluded until we become arhats. So there is that constant gauging, constant checking in, checking ourselves, checking our attitude. A useful sentence or question would be, is there any attachment anywhere? Do I have any attachments? to my views on how the Dhamma is supposed to be. Usually, this is the thing that many of us falter in this journey, and it's a major stumbling block. And we usually use our previous experiences in life to kind of shut that door of trust, not allow ourselves to open. Remember, it's a learning to trust. And ultimately, we cannot blame or place any blames on anyone. A teacher, a teaching, because there needs to be the presence of wisdom, understanding, taking accountability, being responsible for our choices and our adherences to things, to points of view. When the Buddha was seen often speaking on the khandhas, or the 5 aggregates that make up an individual, especially when it comes to the arahant, one of the tools, one of the useful tools in becoming an arahant, he kind of gives us, he even says it in his own way, a shortcut. He says, when we are looking at the khandhas, the person, the noble disciple, starts to see their unreliability, unsteadiness, their instability, and how they, each of them, are individually are sources for more suffering. So he breaks down each of the aggregates, the khandhas, into, think of it as 3 tenses. 3 tenses. He says, the noble disciple sees when the aggregate of form, or name and form, namarupa, comes to be, when it's arising. So there needs to be the awareness, there needs to be the mindfulness to be able to catch that when it arises, when it comes into focus, into your purview, and you see, And then the second tense is, you notice also when it is present, when it is being sustained, for however long. And then the third tense is, the mind of the noble disciple is able to see the past, the present, and now the ending, the disappearance of that name and form. That's the first khandha. And then we also have the second khandha, a feeling. So the noble disciple is able to see when a feeling comes to be, it arises. And they're not caught. The noble disciple is not caught in the details, being pulled into the storyline of the feeling, which indicates ignorance. Instead, they're able to follow through. They're like very curious, almost like a child waiting, looking at the chimney, waiting for Santa Claus to come through the chimney, waiting, 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 with that eagerness. And then they see how the feeling that arose is being sustained, and poof, poof, it disappears. And same goes with memories, sanya, or perception, sometimes they're called, how a memory shows up. And that especially pulls us into its own storyline, which has so many tinges and colorations of feelings attached to it, which pulls us into this cobweb of further and further and further storylines. And we're removed completely from the reality of the moment. So the noble disciple is able to follow through as the memory arose to the present sustainability of it, the sustaining of it, and then they carefully see it disappear, poof, to the clouds. And when they see the other aggregate, or sankharas, I like to call them mental conjurings or generative causes. They're basically the same thing. The force, the energy based on habits and tendencies of old, when they arise, you can think of sankharas as also the editing process of the mind. And you see them rise, and then they're sustained for a moment or however long, and then you see them disappear. And then the fifth aggregate, fifth khandha, has to do with vijnana, or consciousness. I like to call them sense awareness. And 6 sense awarenesses. When they show up, when they arise, and you don't get pulled into the story, this sensation reminds me of such and such a time. Being tossed around like a ricocheting billiard ball on a pool table. Instead, you see them rising when they're present, and especially when they disappear. And this is happening so quickly. One consciousness after the other, one consciousness after the other, one sense awareness after the other, one memory after the other. But then it fools the mind enough to think that there is a continuity. Meanwhile, there isn't. And that's why we practice vipassana, to create that space where the mind can look, observe carefully with sati, mindfulness, and with that repeatability of seeing things, how they arise, how they are sustained, and how they disappear. Suddenly we start to understand. And that is sampajanya, the clarity. That is wisdom. That's panya. So we're no longer fooled. An arahant is someone who's no longer fooled by their 5 aggregates. They don't buy into it anymore. So as we're practicing continuously, we start to see that everything we've gone through has been about nibbana all along. Everything we've ever thought, everything we've ever said, we've ever done, has been taking us closer and closer to tasting and realizing the extinction of suffering of all types. Of all types. And it is through trusting this entire process this that we start to get more and more glimpses of the reality behind the smokescreen of concepts and experiences which we call life. I will stop here and open for any questions, thoughts, comments, critiques you might have. If you want to share about your practice, that too. Yes, Jagat.
Thank you, thank you, Bhante.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was a little bit unclear when you talked about the things that arising and then sustaining, and then
Mm.
coming to an end or changing. I'm wondering, in our daily life, is it uh, how would you say it? I mean, as human beings, a lot of times we have desires, anticipations, and we look forward to so-called future, whether that's delusional or not. But a lot of times, we can only sustain ourselves by anticipating or working toward a future. And then, whether it's a better economic future, health future, uh, psychological future, or whatever. And then we might actually, well, speaking for myself, I might feel, okay, even if in the end it turns out to be an illusion or delusional, the process was worth it because, you know, at least I found out, and the journey was interesting nonetheless. So I guess what I'm asking is, if given this kind of, I don't really understand it too well, this structure that you just kind of laid out. Mm, how can we reconcile it with our just human habits to basically want a future or want to see a better future? That's all. I mean, it's kind of mundane, I guess the way I put it, but I did have that question.
Thank you for your question. Well, first we need to understand and appreciate the fact that the Dhamma does not go against your life. One of the definitions of Dhamma is also life, is also nature. It's not just the Buddha's teachings. That's one of the definitions. Now, having said that, we need to be reminded of the very important fact that the Buddha did not negate the responsibilities that one needs to have in life. And that also includes what you mentioned about achieving goals. I mean, we need to have goals. Sometimes people think that in order for us to practice the Dhamma, we need to relinquish everything, da 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 da. No, no, no. It is the responsibility that each of us, each moment has. Now, it is the attitude towards that responsibility, call it, uh, uh, you know, certain things, tasks that you need to do on a daily basis, starting with waking up at a certain time, to getting up, maybe doing a few stretches with your body, brushing your teeth. All these things are important tasks. Now, or it could be something even much bigger, like getting ready to go to a meeting at the office, whether it's on physically or through Zoom, but where you will be needing to put the final signature on a multi-billion-dollar deal for which you've worked all your entire life, or something that many people's lives are dependent on based on that decision. So we're talking about, well, it's a big deal. Now, this does not go contrary to what the Buddha was saying. Now, the question is, what is the attitude? Now, as I'm driving to go to that meeting, per se, or as I'm getting ready to brush my teeth, there's no difference when it comes to the looking at the khandhas, that mechanism, that formula of seeing how it arises, because so many people, when we brush our teeth, we're not even present. How many times can you catch yourself to even become observant of what you're, let's say, presuming you're using your right hand to brush your teeth? Well, what is the left hand doing? Is it in your pocket, if you have a pocket? Is it scrolling through your phone while you're brushing the teeth? Because in these scenarios, obviously the person's mind is completely not in the present. You definitely don't have a clue when a thought is arising. Oftentimes we're not even aware of the feelings that are being generated, or the sense awareness around the lips as, or around your gums as the toothbrush is going back and forth. Now, the mind that is present, however, is able to see each of these sensations, or each of these thoughts, or each of these memories, or each of these forms or sense awarenesses as they arise. So you're completely anchored, nailed into the present moment of experiencing. So this has nothing to do with becoming an obstacle, if you will, to the major, life responsibilities that one may have, whether it's reaching, the goals of life, work environment, or responsibilities towards family members, etc., etc. So how's that? Is that clearer now, do you think?
Yeah, I guess I've been watching too many advertisings about these kind of, idyllic retreats, and you see these kind of people, especially white people, like smiling and whatever in Vermont or wherever it is, and like leave everything behind and learn, kind of go on the inner journey and all this type of thing, and very
Yes.
expensive too usually.
Yes.
Usually they're in Tricycle, that magazine, and
Yeah.
so I guess it creates this illusion. Maybe I was a little bit not misguided, but I said, "Wow, this is kind of it's not really for me."
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I like what you said about brushing your teeth. So it occurred to me that, okay, I mean, this is a little bit strange, but nowadays when I brush my teeth, if I can taste the toothpaste, I said, "Oh, great! I still have my taste." So that's a good sign. Before, I didn't pay any attention to the toothpaste. It just, oh, okay, it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
mint flavor or some other flavor.
Mm-hmm.
But now when I taste the toothpaste, even though I don't really like the taste, I say, oh, this is great. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I can still taste the toothpaste. That's the first thing I usually taste in the morning. So,
Well,
you know,
mm,
but I was just thinking, maybe since we do brush our teeth, most of us, then how about like, and we brush our hair, how about brushing your mind? uh,
Ah,
at the beginning of the day, because you're brushing everything else. You know, brush your shoulders, the lint off, brush your teeth, brush your
mhm,
hair. But usually we don't really think of our mind in the right
mhm,
early in the morning, like, oh, I have to
mhm,
maybe get my mind sort of a little bit straighter
mhm,
in order and the straight things before I
mhm.
kind of start the day. You know?
Well, let's use the example that you gave of you becoming now able to see or to taste, where you noticed that you're more glad, contented that the fact that there is, oh, I still can taste. Oh, so there's no COVID here. Okay, we're good. Now, the way to brush the mind using the brain or mind, as you pointed, would be to take that a step further. Oh, so I do have a preference between not having any taste to having a taste. Why? Because what is that? So what is going on there? So the five aggregates are presenting themselves beautifully right there in the whole process of experiencing the taste, because there is the presence of, oh my God, oh, I can taste. So that means the fear is kind of pushed aside. It's shelved for a sense. Fear of what? So the mind wanted certain conditions to take place. And here they are. Perhaps all night, part of the mind, part of the brain was kind of anticipating for a morning to come so that you can get up and brush your teeth. So you can actually do the litmus test of, hey, am I going to be surprised pleasantly or in a bad way? So all these things have to do with the mind's tricks, the mind's tricks. So then it no longer is about the content or the detail. The detail here would be, earlier I was mentioning, I think, something about details, no longer being fooled by the details or the concepts or the things that are, you know, apparent, loud. Instead, to look at the pattern. So the Buddha was very much interested about the pattern from the very, from the get-go. That's why he gave the three characteristics of existence, of nature. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. He was basically pointing out the pattern, the structure of life. Now, can we do the same thing in our own lives? Can we see, oh, so there's anicca. I was worried before I started brushing my teeth. And once I discovered that I can taste, poof, gone. That fear is gone. Now my mind is gone like light speed, maybe faster, and trying to figure out things for me to not worry or worry about that have nothing to do with the brushing of the teeth anymore, because you're done. You're past that point until tomorrow or at night. So in that sense, I've never seen any contradiction between the Dhamma and life. And that's why the Buddha says, you know, there are people and sects and individuals who are against me. Meanwhile, I sit here not having any qualms with anybody. And when we look at the Buddha, he's also the embodiment of the Dhamma. So when he was talking about himself, he was also talking about the Dhamma. But the mind, we like to differentiate, separate, and meanwhile, the life is wasted. Life is wasted. It's like another form of divide and conquer, the imperialistic way of thinking. But we've been living our lives like that because now the person is nearly 100 and the faculties don't work anymore. Maybe there's Alzheimer's, etc. And yes, they might have some experiences here and there, but it is a wasted life because they're still suffering, lots of it. So looking at the Dhamma in practical sense is essential. And I can never find myself being in agreement with, on a side note, with those retreats um, that are so expensive that you even have to be on, waiting lists, and they cost an arm and a leg and a head. And especially when you think about those teachers, and many of those their teachers not having had paid a penny, not a penny paid to these teachers whom they had gone and learned from. So the Dhamma is not for sale, never. So my heart aches when I hear about, when people put like $5,000-6,000 for a 2-week retreat or a month retreat. There's no justification for that except for greed, of course. So just, it's my personal view on it. Any other thoughts? Yes, KK.
I just wanted to ask the most basic, but also the most mundane question about the first precept.
Yes.
So, to not kill. So, is that the reason why most Buddhists are vegetarian? And how important do you think of that practice to be a vegetarian, to be a Buddhist? And also, what happened about, is it even bad to like kill a mosquito, that is biting your face? And I had the last experience of a little scorpion that I found in my bathroom. And I said, okay, what am I going to do with it? So I just really, just a very practical question. How do you apply that?
I usually would have a cup, a transparent cup, a glass cup, or even like
Too.
and something like an envelope that's thick enough, or like a postcard, always available. In Milan, when I was staying there, I would get a lot of mosquitoes, and you would see me always going in and out, in and out, in and out of my room to kind of put them on, cover the mosquito. And sometimes would give, the mosquito would give me a hard time. So it would be an interesting adventure, uh, putting it on, taking it outside. So it has a lot to do with patience and anger. So I've never seen any valid reasons for me to say, yes, when you're a vegetarian, then you are automatically not breaking the first precept. Now, I've read several places that even Hitler was a vegetarian. I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but you know, it's Hitler. So people, again, it's an outside thing. I've seen a lot of, when I was a vegetarian for 10 years, I still had the desire to harm. Nothing happened. So it was an outside thing. And I started to separate myself. Now, that was, of course, an individual thing, and I don't know how it is with others, but what I'm trying to say is simply by choosing a certain lifestyle, simply because it has turned into a habit, does not necessarily mean that the first precept is being kept. That's what I'm saying. Unfortunately, people say that, oh, because of my dietary choices, then I've eliminated any anger in my mind. Well, unless the person has become an anagami or an arahant, that ain't happening. So, but as far as the animals or mosquitoes, uh, you know, I think I've mentioned one time when I was on a retreat in Joshua Tree, and I was noticing I guess that tells you something about my mindfulness. The person sitting in front of me, um, I noticed this white spider crawling up the blanket behind him. And I was like, oh boy, deep down, I noticed how there was this gladness in my heart, in my mind, that it wasn't happening to me. But I wanted to also like nudge him and saying, hey, like, or at least put, blow the spider off. And I said, no, I have to be more mindful, da 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 da. Meanwhile, I was very much aware of every single movement of the spider and not my mind. So an hour or so later, obviously the spider disappeared. And I noticed something crawling the back of my neck. And guess what? It was the spider, the same spider probably, because, and that's when my mind was working on what was happening here with this individual. And I felt the spider come down the side, the front of my face, and I took a peek, and it was the guy, and it just crawled down and went away. So now it wasn't a mosquito. I think it was in New Zealand or somewhere where I was sitting, and or maybe it was in Malaysia. I don't remember. Anyhow, the thing was, finally, I gave up my fervent effort to push away any mosquito that landed on my skin. And I said, okay, mister, you're talking about dana and generosity. This little guy is here to get his daily food. Look at your size. I'm 6'5". I'm huge. So what am I going to lose? Just like a, it's not going to be a pint of blood. It's just a little mosquito. But then there was so much like resistance, and I started like, it was in Milan actually, I remember. And it just, I felt it like the sharp needle like thing that went into my skin. And I was noticing how there was this fighting going on in the mind. Meanwhile, I'm just letting my attachment to this body open up more and more and more and more. And I tried as best as I can to kind of bring out a sense of generosity towards this mosquito. And eventually, it took what it wanted and left. But I learned a lesson. We are trying to protect this body that's going to die. It's going to turn into bones. Sinews are already, its bones are there actually. Everything is there, which is the delusion that, oh, look how lovely the skin is. There's hair. This. It's nonsense. But to protect the mosquito, and I mean, again, the Buddha was not a sadist. Have a cup, put the cup on top of the mosquito, or I'm presuming the spider isn't going to be that big. Putting it on, like when it's you see it, putting it, covering it up with the cup to make sure that its tentacles or arms or legs and antennae are not being damaged, and then sliding gently the card between the wall or the surface and the edges, the brim of the glass, gently, and then the mosquito is going to give you room if you do it gently. And then you slide it outside. Just make sure you hold on to the glass or the cup carefully, and then slide your hand away and just shake the glass once or twice, and then they come out. I used to get different types of spiders in my apartment in the past. Very exotic looking ones, definitely poisonous. But it would be lovely to just see them and talk to them and just slide them out. So I hope that helps.
Well, actually, I think the difficulty sometimes is to say to what extent we apply to orchestrate wisdom and the precept. So, say in the case of the scorpion, my wanting to follow the precept would be that I would like to put it in a bottle and put it outside the yard. But then I thought to myself, well, if it's outside the yard, it's going to crawl into someone else's yard or may harm a little kid in the neighbor. So I thought, in that case, isn't it better to kill the scorpion than releasing it? And then with your example about mosquito, what if you're in an area where mosquito is not just taking a little bit of your blood, but the possibility of causing malaria? So I just feel, to what extent do we kind of coordinate wisdom and...
I would not be taking this body with me anywhere. It's destined to die. It's 5 aggregates, remember. They're already falling apart from the moment they come together. They're already falling apart. So I would consider those thoughts to be just mind games, because long before you and I showed up, our species showed up, the spiders and the scorpions were there. So who am I to be the judge and executioner of this poor animal, who accidentally walked into my room or something? Plus, he's or she's or it is going about its business as usual. You are the hindrance, you are the obstacle for it. So, and letting it go, at least you've secured a safe passage for the animal. And we don't know whether it will crawl into someone else's home. And was that encounter between you and the scorpion helpful in allowing you to become cognizant of your mind processes, your attachments, your fears? As for malaria, many of the monks who are forest dwellers and who sit and meditate in the jungles in Asia, even though many of them, if not all of them, have these huge mosquito nets around them that they sit, but they're not always going to be in a mosquito net. So mosquitoes don't just attack when you're meditating, when you're eating, when you're walking, etc. So I've heard about many of these teachers and monks that they already have had malaria. Especially, I know from the Thai forest tradition. I believe from the Thai forest tradition, Ajahn Pasano, he has had malaria, and I know of an acquaintance of mine. His mother had malaria when she was a very young child, and I knew her when she was in her 80s, and she hadn't died. So, but anyhow, we're going to die anyhow, right? So what's the big deal?
Well, just one last question, because I was actually at Russell's 5 Precepts ceremony at his temple, and I was quite surprised to hear the monk saying that it's not important to be a vegetarian because we need the nutrition from meat. And so that's why one of the reasons why I asked you that question. So I fully agree with you. Just because you're vegetarian doesn't doesn't make you a good person. But the other way around, to say that, okay, because we need the nutrition as human being, does it mean it's okay to then, eat meat? And from your answer this far is that, well, why should our life or our health be more important than, someone? I would kind of get that from what you said. Thank you very much.
And that is the dilemma that many people have. They think, first of all, that Buddhism is a vegetarian religion, path, and that because a monk has told you, for example, that we need nutrition, etc., from an animal, that automatically means that the monk is going to go out and kill an animal if they check into the refrigerator and there's no meat left. So I don't believe in that. So even if there's no meat, that will never ever be a situation where I would permit myself to go ahead and kill an animal. There are in fact rules the Buddha set for, especially for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, where there are certain criteria that need to be there in order for us to eat meat. Um, I've talked about this. They did a documentary with me like 2 years ago, but I had to point these things out. One of them is, let's say, you're not supposed to, if you doubt, if you suspect rather that the animal has been killed for you, you cannot touch it. You cannot eat it. If you've seen the spilling of the animal's blood, you cannot touch it. You cannot eat it. If you've heard the animal scream while it's being killed, you cannot touch it or eat it, etc. And obviously, if you've done it, you cannot. You've already broken a major precept. So it needs to be offered. And sometimes when people offer me food or invite me over, I have to ask them, is the animal killed for me? I have a student from my high school teaching days who likes to go fishing. Years ago, about 10 years ago, he invited me to go and eat. He hosted me, and I asked him, "Did you kill the animals for me? Did you fish? Did you get the fish for me?" He says, "No." He's like, "I know you're weird, so I'm not going to." So I'm getting it from the frozen part. So I've caught them like weeks ago. So I said, okay. So I hope that kind of.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I saw a hand.
This is Terry. I didn't put my hand up.
Oh, yeah.
It's not neutral to say that if we don't kill the animal ourselves, or if it is not killed specifically for us, then there's no harm done, because by consuming meat from whatever source, we are maintaining the demand for meat and causing the animals to be killed. But I just want to clarify the disinformation about we need meat for certain nutrients. That's not true. In fact, the person who has the current world record for powerlifting is a complete vegetarian.
Yes.
Just want to throw that out there as a clarification.
Thank you, Terry. I try to stay away from the argument on this, and that these are some of the things that people bring up that I know about the powerlifter. I know about several actually athletes and triathletes who are absolute vegans, and they're fine. Now, as a Buddhist and as a teacher of the Dhamma, I always will come from the standpoint of the Dhamma. And the issue that many people have is, again, I don't want us to turn this into like a forum for us to argue on vegetarianism or anti. I just want to point out something, that there is misinformation when it comes to the Dhamma. Many people think that the Buddha was an advocate of complete vegetarianism. That's never the case. In fact, his own brother-in-law or cousin, Devadatta, wanted to establish that as a rule. But then the Buddha's point was very clear. He said there is no issue with that if a monk chooses to. However, he says,
and they receive what is given. I understand that.
Yes. So this is important. And many people want to become self-righteous, and by imposing their own views and their own lifestyle choices on the Dhamma or on the Buddha, and that is wrong. And because the Buddha was very clear.
Yeah, agree.
And the Buddha actually, we as bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, we have a bowl. And by me going to your door, and when I see you offering me fish, for example, and saying, "Excuse me, I'm not going to accept that," I have eliminated much merit from being accrued by you for offering food to an ascetic, to a recluse. So it didn't benefit anyone because the meat is there, already cooked. So for those reasons, and the Buddha had established some criteria to be followed, and criteria that were to be followed very carefully. Again, it's we shouldn't confuse the two, that simply because of the lifestyle choice of a person, whether they're carnivores, omnivores, vegan, that immediately necessitates that a person is on a higher level of
I
such.
agree.
So we need to be very cautious of that, because we're living in a culture that promotes that, unfortunately. So, Narina, you had a question, or you have a hand up.
Simply wanted to say what you have mentioned on different occasions, that the basic fact that the Buddha was not a vegetarian himself. He would eat whatever was offered, as you just mentioned. And I also, from my experience, I've listened to the entirety of the Majjhima Nikaya and many other suttas, and I don't remember any sutta where the Buddha says you shouldn't eat meat, or somehow relating that to the practice. The only times I remember listening to that was, as you mentioned, about the 4 conditions for monastics not to eat meat.
Mm-hmm.
But I can be wrong. However, I haven't come across a sutta where it talks about specifically not eating meat, and as relating that to the practice, to the path. Thank you.
Yes, and yes, go ahead, Greg.
So just quickly before I start what I was going to say, for KK, there are things you can buy on Amazon that bug catcher.
Yes.
It has a little fan inside here, and so it's like a vacuum cleaner. You just point it at the bug, suck it up, and then you can close a little switch and you can look at it if you like, and it's for kids. And then you take it outside, open it up and drop it out, and that saves you having to get bitten. It's almost impossible to catch a mosquito with it, but anything that crawls solves the problem.
Okay.
20-some
you.
dollars on Amazon. Bug catcher. So
Fly catcher. Okay.
Go ahead, Greg.
So on the answer of the Majjhima Nikaya, if you look at Majjhima Nikaya 55, which is with Jivaka, this is what with Jivaka says, and it's not about the Buddha eating meat, it's about the preparer of the food. So it says, Jivaka, anyone who slaughters a living creature, especially for the realized one or the realized one's disciple, makes much bad karma for 5 reasons. When they say, go fetch that living creature, this is the first reason. When that living creature experiences pain and sadness as it's led along by a collar, this is the second reason. When they say, go slaughter that living creature, this is the third reason. When that living creature experiences pain and sadness as it's being slaughtered, this is the fourth reason. When they provide the realized one or the realized one's disciple with unallowed food, this is the fifth reason. Anyone who slaughters a living creature, especially for the realized one or the realized one's disciple, makes much bad karma for 5 reasons. So it doesn't prevent the disciples eating food that's left over from them using it for themselves, but it certainly is very clear about the karma that is produced in the slaughtering of the animals.
Of course. Thank you for that. And there is, whichever way you look at it, it is taking the life and harming of another living being. So there's no ifs and buts about it. So it's a killing. It's a breaking of the first precept, as is the case also with someone who is a soldier defending one's country, who happens to be a Buddhist, let's say. If they have to defend the country and in the process of that kill the enemy who's attacking them, they still broke the first precept. Now, so we need to be aware of this. And obviously I was coming from the angle of of a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni who's offered the food, if there's any suspicion on our part that the food or the animal has been killed for us, we cannot accept it. And one of the best things to do is to preemptively go ahead and let the donor know that they cannot do that. So that's crucial to be made aware of. And another thing that many people neglect to consider is, had there been no food offered, the Buddha was never going to go, nor his noble disciples were going to go and look for an animal to kill. For a whole rainy season, he was in the Kosambi incident, the Buddha was in the jungle all by himself, being catered to by the elephant and the monkey, and who brought him honey and water and fruits and things like that they could pluck from the trees. But had those animals, let's say, not been there, the Buddha might have died. There is no putting oneself above the other animal. I will never permit myself to go ahead and even kill a rat, if I'm out there and there's no meat and there's no food there. Again, the work, we need to not be pulled away aside, because we have to give this obviously some emphasis, but not too much emphasis other than what we've talked about. Otherwise, the main work is being left undone or not addressed. Yes, Terry, I can, you raised your hand.
Yes, I had heard that there's some discussion in certain circles as to whether insects are covered by the first precept. Have you heard any of that dialogue?
I have not heard any dialogue, and the platforms or the forums, I try to not put too much credence on, because there's many points of views out there. And that's one of the reasons why I went back to the suttas, and I extract my information from the suttas and my own experience, because even if a person is in robes, does not necessarily mean much. If what they're saying does not agree with the teachings. Now, insects are living beings. And in fact, not only insects, but one also has to be careful of other beings that are invisible. And devas, for example, we can have harmful thoughts towards devas and other beings as well, which no one does talk about. So we need to be anchored in the teachings within the suttas first and foremost, and not go by whatever.
Yeah, no, this was a remark made by Analio just as an offside during one of his lectures. For a program I was listening to. The default is that it includes insects. Yes, I was just wondering if you were aware of that discussion.
No, I haven't. Thank you for bringing that up, Terry.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other thoughts? Yes, Greg.
So just on Terry's thoughts there, if you look at the Karaniya Metta Sutta, it talks about whatever living beings there be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen or the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. So that's pretty inclusive. There are no living beings that are excluded from the things that we need to look after.
Yes, and when we are doing the metta practice, for example, when it comes to the point ekang nisang paritava viharati, and it says in the first direction, or the first corner of the universe, I'm radiating loving kindness to. So to the second, so to the third, and so to the fourth, as above, so below, and across. All beings, including hungry ghosts, including demons, including hell dwellers, let alone living beings that we can see. And yeah, I mean, this could, the mind loves to engage in philosophical debates. I don't think there's any debate going on here because we're all in agreement as to what is important. It's important, though, to not be pulled in away, rather, from what is really, really essential, other than anchoring ourselves on the five precepts, knowing that we're practicing it, and moving forward with that practice, and not being so, we say what we need to say to the world around us to pick up, but not start fighting with them, because 99.9% of the population will disagree with us, will disagree with the Buddha. Buddhists disagree with the Buddha. So, yeah, but thank you for your contributions, guys.
One last point can I say? I think, did you mention that we intentionally kill? Because we unintentionally kill many bacteria when we have a bowel movement.
Yes, yes. Yes. The Chetana is number one. That distinguishes the Dhamma from everything else. Since and during and long after it was taught by the Buddha, Chetana, which is the intentionality. And that was actually one of the first lessons I've ever learned in this life when I was studying the Dhamma, where Mahathera was explaining to me how, when I was asking about the kamma and the effects of kamma, vipaka, he said, when you're driving away from class tonight, if you hit someone, I will first ask you, was there any intention in killing that person or in hitting someone with your car? And that is the distinguishing factor between a kamma and something that was done without volition, without any intentionality. And previously or earlier, in the time of the Buddha, or even since, in Hinduism or Jainism, it's very clear. If it's done, you've just accrued kamma, completely ignoring the importance of Chetana. And the Buddha's point was very clear, and you have countless suttas where the Buddha talks about this, especially when it comes to the Jains, the religion where they are big proponents on kamma. So any other thoughts? Yeah, oh, we're over time, but I'm wondering if there's any other questions aside from this topic that we've covered extensively. No questions?
Very helpful, Bhante. Thank you.
You're welcome. KK, did you have your hand up?
I would, what you just said about intention just triggered in my thought that nevertheless, if you kill someone because you're intoxicated, drunk driving, then I feel that it's almost like even more guilty, because you violated a precept, and in violating the precept, you also kill, even if it's not intentional. I just feel that it's like not easily forgiven. Yeah, I just feel that.
In fact, it's so dangerous. The fifth precept, I've dedicated over 30-40 minutes sometimes during talks just highlighting the importance of the fifth precept, especially with the legalization of certain drugs and more to come, I guess. Because if we break the fifth precept, the rest of them go as well. Kiss them goodbye, because it's done. Because there isn't the awareness of the mind to stay in the present moment. There isn't sati, there is no sampajanya, it's gone. But that does not eliminate one's responsibility. And you're right, it's worse now. Adevik, I think you had your hand up. Oh, thought somebody's hand. All right. So
I
great.
had my hand up for one last comment.
Oh, I can't see it, so that's why. Go ahead, Terry.
I'm starting to think that social media, like addictive social media, might also be considered to be an intoxicant,
Oh yeah.
and that we should refrain from that. So I've been cutting down on YouTube. I can just get craving YouTube and various media that's with us all the time on our phones. So our definition of intoxicant should probably widen to include not just substances we imbibe, but what other things we expose ourselves to. Just a comment.
Oh, absolutely. I've mentioned this in previous talks, how using a smartphone and just checking to see if you've gotten a text, or checking to see if somebody has liked your comment or Facebook update is also addictive. And it's a manifestation of addiction. So we don't dwell just on the certain substances that have been usually seen as addiction causing, et cetera, et cetera. It's become such pervasive. So yes, absolutely. Okay, so I think it's time for us to do the dedication of merits, I think. Yes. The eyes aren't working so well. 5 khandhas coming apart. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired, for the acquisition and achievement of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, and devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for being here. Try to...
Can I just ask one technical question? Are we
yes.
going to meet next week? Just
Yes.
conditioned by New Year and everything.
Oh, what is next week? Sorry, I've just been going on and on and on. Like,
I am not sure I remember, but yeah.
New Year's Day.
Year's Day.
oh, New Year's Day.
Wonderful way to
Well, none of us are going to be
here.
drinking sober.
I will be on. I will be here. You know, I'll have the room by myself. So if you can't make it.
No, we really wanted to come. That's why I was asking. Yeah. Oh, we'll be there too. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Try to maintain that softness, the balancing constantly, but that doesn't get us off the hook of living responsibly and with sati and sampajanya. And see if you can incorporate the 5 khandhas, those 3 tenses I was referring to, when they're arising, when they're present, sustaining, even for a millisecond, and then when they disappear. See if you can catch it maybe once a day, just one of those 5. It's interesting. And so I wish you pleasant journeys. Did someone say something? Yes, Jagat.
I was going to say it's actually like a Tai Chi, almost like Tai Chi move, rising, and then, this kind of move, and then, move downward, or, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're a Tai Chi guy, so I thought, okay, this is easy way for me to remember. Thank you.
Lovely reference. Yes. We use whatever tools we have, so let's use them.
Okay.
And please be safe, and keep that smile going. Till next time. Wow.